Hi everyone, welcome to the Corning Museum of Glass. This is the All About Glass live stream demonstration. My name is James Geekie. Helping me today is Caleb Carlson. So today we're going to go over everything you need to know to kind of step into the hot shop and understand our world. We have, in any hot shop, we have three main pieces of equipment. We have our melting furnace. So that melting furnace is at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's on 24/7. It's what we're going to take from the whole entire time we're demonstrating today. And as we work with the glass, we're going to be using our reheating chamber. So our reheating chamber has no glass inside. It's at 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to use this piece of equipment to reheat the piece as we work throughout the whole process, keeping it above 1,000 degrees the entire time. And at the end of the process, we're going to go into one of our annealing ovens. So this is an oven. It's not technically a furnace. It's at 910 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just holding the glass at a nice even temperature so we can then bring it down to room temperature over the course of 12 hours without thermal shock happening. Now, that's pretty much the main piece of equipment. It's really important to know that the furnace, it's on 24/7 because all of that glass inside, there's 1,000 pounds of fluid molten glass in there. If it ever shuts off, it's going to constrict and cool down. And if it does that, it's going to crack the ceramic housing inside. It's like a big bowl, we call it crucible. And if that happens, it's pretty much game over. The furnace is broken, so we have to keep that on all the time, 24/7, for pretty much years on end. If you ever want to shut off your furnace, you're going to have to ladle all that glass out and bring it down slowly. But that's probably the most important thing you'll see. That's pretty much what we have going on here. We can talk about the tools we're going to use today. Three main types of tools. We have metal tools here, which are called jacks. So you'll see me use this most of the time. It's used to constrict the glass and also to run along the side of the glass. And when I use these, you'll see them start to like smoke and burn. And that's not actually the metal itself. It's the beeswax that I coat on these. Now, glass, the characteristics of glass, it sticks to anything that's hot. So if this metal tool heats up too much, it will stick to it. So that's why we coat it in some sort of lubricant like beeswax, so the wax burns off before the actual tool sticks to it. Now we also have two different types of shears. We have diamond shears, and it's only because they open up in a diamond. They're used to cut rounded edges. Not a tool you want to coat in beeswax. Obviously, you want it to grab and cut through it. We have straight shears that are good to make straight cuts, straight edge cuts. Also another tool you want to cut through the glass, not something you want to put beeswax on. And then finally we have our tweezers, used to pinch and pull. So you always want these to be grabby. You don't ever want wax on these either. And then lastly, we have a tag, which is probably the only other tool you'd actually want wax on because it's going to move back and forth and slide on the glass, used to cool and shape the glass in different ways. Now those are the metal tools. We also have wood blocks that we'll go over once we start shaping and making our first form. They're just cherry wood blocks soaked in water. And then we have a wadded up piece of newspaper that's soaked in water that we also can use to shape the glass with that we'll go over in just a second. But that's everything. We're going to do the next thing. It's going to be gathering. Caleb's going to gather for us. He's going to use a solid steel iron called a punty rod. So that it's not hollow through. We're just going to gather a solid piece of glass out of the furnace. And as he sticks to the furnace, he's going to stick to the glass, turn. It will ravel around the end of his rod. As he makes a scooping motion, he'll come out with a nice, healthy gather of glass. Now, it's really soft. It's viscous. It's moving. He has to turn the pipe the entire time he's working. If he ever stops turning, this glass is going to fall right to the floor. And it's also very important to know that this glass is cooling down the whole entire time it comes out of the furnace. So as it cools, you'll start to see that orange glow dissipate, turn to clear. It's solid right now. The working time in this is probably a minute or so. Caleb, if you want to just roll it on the what we call a marber or a stainless steel table just to cool it down slightly. This is a tool that we just use to shape the glass, and what he's doing is drawing heat out of it. And as he starts to cool it, you'll start to see that orange glow get lower and lower, begin to become clear. And from there on, it's going to slowly continue to go to clear. Now this glass, well over 1,000 degrees, if it ever drops below that point, it goes through what we call thermal shock, which means it cracks, it breaks, it'll essentially explode. But that might take a little longer than what we're going to wait for. So Caleb, if you just want to dunk it in water, we'll accelerate the process. And as you see, as he dips it in just room temperature water, he has made 1 million little cracks on the surface. And that's thermal shock. The same thing will occur if this drops below 900 degrees as we work on the piece throughout the whole entire process. So that's why we have our reheating chamber. It's going to reheat the piece as we work, keeping it above this temperature so this cracking doesn't occur. Now that's just to start. Caleb, if you want to start making a flower, we can start kind of seeing how the glass will stretch and pull off of the iron as we work it. So again, just using a solid steel iron called a punty rod. Caleb's going to do that act of gathering once more. So he's touching down to the surface, turning, it's spooling on the end of his iron. As he scoops, he comes out with a smaller gather. And here's where we start going into a process where we go and do things in certain steps. So this first step, obviously we're not going to get a flower immediately. Caleb's just going to let this glass set up on his iron, drawing some heat out of it. Using his jacks, as you can see, there's sliding on the glass. You can start to see that smoke occur. And Caleb's basically just creating an anchor point, because we're going to actually gather again on this material on the end of his iron. And then that's going to give us the mass for the flower. Now, once Caleb goes to gather again, it's really important not to be too hot. Once he goes back into that giant mass of glass, he's going to reheat this gather on his iron. That core is going to start to heat up the same temperature as the outside layer he's about to put on. And if he's too hot, he will lose control and the whole thing will fall off. Luckily, Caleb's a really good glass blower, so he's going to let it cool down quite a bit before it goes into the furnace.
All right. Let's go get a second gather.
I think we're going to go for our second gather now. And I'm just holding the door so Caleb doesn't get too hot coming out. So now we have 2 times the amount of material that we had before. Now glass is very sticky. It loves to stick to stuff that's hot, especially itself. So every time you gather, you usually get about 2 times the amount that you're working with before. Caleb's just now shaping the gather on the marber. I'm going to try and stay out of his way. And that is the taglia that he's about to use. He's just pushing nice and soft on the surface of the glass, pushing it back onto the iron to give a nice anchor point, creating a nice round disc. Now using the tweezers, he's going to grab the outside edge and pull 5 points. And that's going to be the petals of the flower. He's going to let it set up slightly and then pull 5 more points. And as he's doing this, he's actually cooling the outside of the flower. And that inside layer is still much hotter than the outside. So as he has all of his points, he's going to continue to pull out away from him, kind of setting up that exterior amount of glass, creating the petals, but then pulling the interior amount of glass to create the stem. And as he stretches it, you can kind of see how the glass is clear, the face of it, that's it cooling. And right at the iron, you can still see a nice healthy orange glow where he's getting that nice stretch. Now he's just going to let it fall, stretch again, let it fall at the bench, kind of letting gravity do most of the work. Just grabbing his diamond shears, just another tool that we use to grab the glass with, stretching it out, and now he's slowly going to turn the pipe as he's stretched out, and as the glass sets up, it's going to give us a really nice curl. Now from here, I'm actually going to help him out and hold on to the top as he's squeezing a constriction mark in the bottom. Now that is the weakest part of the entire flower. That's where it's actually going to break from the whole entire piece. Caleb, I'm going to let go. And this is where we're going to actually knock off the end of the pipe onto our knockoff stand. It's just a piece of Kevlar that doesn't shock the glass. And I'm just going to use and hold it with a face up, Caleb, just so it's standing straight up. I'm going to use an oxypropane torch, basically just to melt away the shear mark. So when we take it out of the annealer the next day, there's no sharp spots, completely finished piece. We can actually put on some Kevlar gloves some more here. And I'm going to go into our annealing oven that's actually across the studio. Here, right side. Always a fun part of the day to stick your head into a 900-degree oven. That is just the way the game works sometimes. And that is a flour. So from there on, we're going to continuously add to that oven. That oven is at 910 degrees, so it's right above the thermal shock point, so that flour won't crack, it won't change shape. And from this point on, we can shut that annealer off and it will cool down to room temperature over the course of 12 hours. Now that's the annealing process. All glasses go through annealing. Soda lime glass, this is a very small, not very thick piece, so it only needs that 12-hour period. If you made something more intricate, thicker, larger, the annealing process gets prolonged. So you can have anywhere between like a 24-hour annealing cycle, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, depending on what you're making. But that was a flour. So from here on out, we'll go through a hollow form, which I'm going to make a cup with a handle and a lip wrap so you guys can see the different characteristics of what the glass can do while we make just one particular piece. So I'm actually going to gather on a hollow rod called a blowpipe. So it's a hollowed out steel iron. These have been in our pipe warmer for quite some time, so they have a bit of carbon built up on them. I like to just kind of brush them clean so no bubbles happen. Just quenching the pipe in water just so it's not super hot, so it doesn't throw any bubbles my way. I'm just going to gather. Now I'm actually going to roll this clear gather through white color called frit. Now frit is just colored, crushed up pieces of glass with different metal oxides that create each individual color. And all it's doing is heating up and sticking to the surface of the glass. It looks very similar to sprinkles on ice cream cones. When you get sprinkles on your ice cream when you go out, it kind of sticks to the surface as they roll through it. Looks the same way, same action. Now I'm just melting in all that color. And I'm actually going to roll through another color called hyacinth. It's like one of my favorite purples. I'm going to melt all this crushed up pieces of glass again. Now I'm just getting the glass as hot as I can because I have to shape the whole material. This is where you're not really going to separate a heat. You want the whole entire thing hot because I'm changing the whole form. I'm just going to use one of our blocks. So it's just a piece of cherry wood. This is way too big. A smaller one. Here we go. And it's just like a little cup. Shapes the glass into a nice rounded form so we can push air into it nice and easily. So it's nice and spherical, round. And this is probably a tool you won't see in most hot shops. This device that I'm using right here, it is our alternative inflation device. Now it's basically two pedals that hook up to a regulator here. And when you step on the pedal, it pushes air through one of the regulator valves into the piece, so it's kind of taking away the blowing aspect of today. But this is a community hot shop. If I'm not in here, a renter could be in here, make your own could be in here. So the pipes are community pipes, so we're just trying to be safe so we don't have multiple people using the same pipes. And from here, just like Caleb was doing with his flour, I'm letting this whole entire gather cool down because I have to go into the furnace again, collect one more layer. So we'll encase the color in clear to create the whole cup. And from here, it's just kind of patience. I'm not the most patient person in the world, so I'm just going to go ahead and cool it down using this. This is just compressed air. I'll go ahead and gather again. So I'm probably going to do what's called a strip gather. I'm going to gather and then I'm going to take some material off just by using gravity and stripping it off in my clear bucket right here. So you can see it drips right off. I actually use the mass of what I'm using to cast off that mass that I just got rid of. So the glass thinned out relatively very, very thin. And then the mass, the heat of what I have on my pipe, disconnected it from the iron. And now I'm just using a little bit bigger of a block. I'm pulling the glass off the end. Makes a really nice Q-tip shape. And from here, I have to get everything back up to that original temperature. Okay, that core temperature of the bubble and the exterior temperature are two very different things, so I don't want to add air into it. They'll kind of push against each other, and I could have a possible uneven bubble blow out into my cup here. So same thing, we're getting this whole entire thing hot, so I'm putting the whole entire piece into the reheating chamber. And from here, I'm going to use my jacks and some air to create what my first glass instructor always called the mother of all shapes. It's a sphere. You can really get a lot of different shapes from just making a sphere at the end of your blowpipe. I'm just cooling down the back end of this bubble, adding some air, letting gravity stretch it out a little bit. And then I'm doing what's called a neckline. So I'm cutting a constriction in the glass, just like Caleb did with his diamond shears. I'm just using a different tool, the jacks, which is going to be the most common tool to make a neckline with. It's also called a jack line. So now I'm just cooling the bottom. We're inflating it even more, making this really nice shape here. And from here, I'm going to actually separate the heat. So I don't want to get the whole thing hot. I just got a neckline in there. I want to keep it that way. Caleb, can I get a paddle in just a second? Paddle the bottom. So I'm just going to heat up the very back end of this sphere. And I'm actually going to let gravity.
I'm going to stand right here. I'm going to stand right
stretch it out into a nice cylinder. And I might do this 1 or 2 times just to really make sure I get the shape that I want. This is going to be a cup with a handle, so I want it to be a straight-walled cylinder. I tend to make my mugs a little too big too, but that's okay. All right, see it just dumped out into a nice cylinder. Caleb, can I get a paddle, please? Very light. Oh, stop for a sec. All right, go ahead again. Push. Caleb's pushing on the bottom as I push on the sides, and we're going to create a nice cylinder by that. Potentially keeping straight walls and a nice flat bottom off Caleb. Perfect. And that's the bottom half of the cup now. So Caleb, can I please get a punty? What Caleb's about to get me is what we call a handle. So anything that's hollow needs to be transferred. You saw before the flour wasn't transferred at all. It was just something that we sculpted at the end of a solid iron. What we're doing now is transferring from one iron to another, or one stick to another, so I can open the top end of the form. Now Caleb's just taking a small piece of glass called a punty, basically turning it into a nice little dome shape. As I wait for them, I'm taking these really light heats called flashes, or a flash heat. And that's just to make sure the top end of the cup is nice and hot, so it does not crack when we do the transfer. I'm just going to add this here to the bottom. Turn it with me, Caleb. Now that that's attached, I'm going to do intentional thermal shock. Break the top half of the cup off. And that's what we call a punty transfer. And I'll give this to you. And from here, now I start to open up the top of the cup. Take a second here, make sure that I'm nice and straight on the blowpipe. Now I'm just going to heat up the top end and do a little shaping with the jacks, Caleb's going to start and gather another bit called a lip wrap. And Caleb, why don't you do a blue lip wrap?
All right.
Hey Caleb, why don't you do a blue lip wrap? Just because that white's pretty prominent. I don't think it's going to show up if we do a white one. So I'm just kind of straightening up the lip of this cup. So when it attaches, it'll attach nice and even. Caleb, can I come in for a flash?
Yep.
So the Punty attachment is just a temporary attachment. I have to make sure that it stays hot enough where it does not crack or detach from the piece prematurely. So you'll see we do a lot of these really small heats that we call flashes. And this lip wrap is actually going to be attached to the top end of the cup here, and then we're going to cast it off using kind of that same method I did with the strip gather. I'm going to take one more flash.
You're not ready yet.
Now I'm just going to attach it to the lip here. Slowly do one full rotation around and cast off.
Beautiful.
Now I'm just going to heat up that top end of the cup here, because that's the only part where we really want to change. We don't want to change the bottom. The bottom's nice and straight. Caleb, can I get a paddle? And from here, I'm going to continue shaping with the jacks to create a nice crisp edge at the top. I'm going to go on the inside, going from the top. Go ahead underneath. Really light and off. So I'm basically just making sure this lip wrap stays attached and stays nice and even. All right, I'll keep that up here. Caleb, I'll take one more paddle just as we do full open. This next heat, I'm going to open this all the way. And we're just heating up that very top end of the cup. Use the jacks again, and as I turn, I'm going to push up, and it's slowly going to open up the cup. Off, Caleb. Go on the outside to get rid of that bump, and make it nice and smooth. Perfect. And there is our cup. Now Caleb is going to do one more attachment here. We're going to do a handle. Make it so it's a nice function mug. Now, this is where I just have to make sure that this cup stays the correct heat so it does not change shape. Or crack as I wait for Candle to handle. Probably just do one more quick gather, Caleb.
Yep.
Make sure it's not too big.
Do some blue.
Yep, coming out. Perfect. Caleb's just coating that in that blue frit on a solid iron. This will be a solid handle. Can I come in for a flash, Caleb? Now just marble that down into a nice cylinder.
Yep.
So as Caleb does that, I'm just making sure that the shape stays nice and straight. I like to err on the side of caution, so I'm just gonna use just a fluffy torch or propane torch to make sure the bottom half of the cup's nice and hot still. I'm gonna take one more flash, Caleb, before we do it. And hopefully, when we attach this, I do not ruin it. All right, Caleb, straight up and down. I'm gonna use my diamond shears to grab hold of the iron. Got a small little handle here. And then I like to just use gravity to attach it. We'll have to clean up some of that cut mark. Let this fall back down center. And now I'm going to use probably a larger tool to really take the heat out of it. Push this back down in center. Now we have a little shear mark at the top that I kind of want to get rid of, just to make sure.
Oh, this torch?
Yeah. So I'm basically just gonna clean up the top end of this cup. Get that shear mark fixed here. And from here now we're just gonna let this thing cool down so we can put it away so it does not change shape. That blue handle really wants to keep moving. There's our cup. I'm going to take one more quick heat. And I'm actually going to put a little water on the punty on the bottom here. Basically doing an intentional thermal shock. I'm actually going to grab tweezers. And sometimes it doesn't want to take off, so we'll just take another flash really quick. Sometimes they just grab on. My bottom could have been a little too hot, causing that punty to fuse. Which just means we have to add a little bit more water and hope that it comes off. This time. There we go, it pops off. We'll use our oxypropane torch to get rid of that punty mark. There you go. Caleb, do you need a door? Are you good?
I'm good.
Okay. Caleb's going to put that away into our annealing oven. And it will anneal the same way the flour does. All right. Awesome. Perfect. That went well.
All right, yeah.
And then we can do a floppy bowl. So
Floppy
a little bit different. We're going to use centrifugal force to open up the lip of this vessel, and we're going to let gravity kind of ruffle it out to make it kind of look like a hanky bowl. But I'll go ahead and get that started. I'm going to use a little bit bigger of a blowpipe this time. Same thing, I'm just going to make sure there's no carbon built up on the iron. I'll go ahead and gather again. Go ahead and come on out. I'll do the same thing, I'll roll it through white. My favorite thing to do, it just brightens every color up, especially transparent colors, obviously. The light will shine right through into the white. Since this will be a little bit bigger of a piece, I'll actually go through the white one more time. It's really fine, so it's obviously two different sizes of frit here. We have like a powder, and as the powder gets blown out, it tends to wash out the color a little bit. It'll go back to clear. Ready, I'll melt this all in. Same thing, I'll go through the hyacinth again. Caleb, am I missing anything? You want to add anything?
No, I mean, as you're watching James work, you can tell that he's moving very quickly, and he's trying to keep the heat in the glass. You know, glass is very much about timing, because it's always changing depending on how hot it is. So he's doing all of these steps very, very quickly so that he can keep it hot, he can keep it malleable.
Keep picking up that long block. See, these cherry wood blocks, if they're not soaked in water the entire time, they burn out really quickly. It's very coarse wood, so it won't burn out like you would, like your natural pine wood, but they usually last a really long time, and it's because they're soaked in water. And what happens is the glass kind of runs on the bed of steam, so it doesn't actually burn the wood entirely. All right, same thing, we just added a little bit of air. We're gonna let this cool down. We'll gather again.
So with the whole act of gathering, James, would you say it's kind of like spooling honey on the end of a stick?
Yeah.
Very much so?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to like practice gathering at home, you could take a bowl of honey with maybe some chopsticks and turn them, yeah? And get a little bit of gathering.
Surface, you'll get the same feeling as we would.
Yeah, it's almost, it's a little bit thicker, right? So if you take your honey, you put it in the fridge for a little while, chill it, and then just take a chopstick, go in and turn.
It'll build up just like it does on our irons, yep. Exactly. Now I'm going to gather this time. I'm actually not going to strip gather. The bowl's going to be a little bit bigger than the cup will be. Just got to turn nice and slow, making sure that first gather doesn't get distorted at all. I'm just shaping it, using a little bit bigger of a block. See if I can fit in the big block. Perfect. Now I'm kind of just coaxing the glass into the shape that I want it to be in. Nice Q-tip shape will give me a nice shape to push air into the material without anything going wrong. You really want to make sure the air gets pushed out in the glass evenly. You don't want your bubble to come off to the left and have one thick side and one thin side. You're not really going to make anything symmetrical if you do it that way. Okay, I'll go ahead and reheat it so we get the whole thing the same temperature. I'm actually going to shape this a little bit different than I did previous. I'm going to let it fall out a little bit, so I'm thinning the lip. And I'm using this watered up piece of newspaper to physically touch the glass and get it to the nice shape that I want. So I'm thinning out the lip, cooling the bottom end of the bubble, really making sure that air gets pushed out the top. Letting gravity stretch it out a little bit. Don't think I have enough heat to get the neckline in. Just take another heat really quick. Same thing, just getting it nice and hot. We're changing the whole shape, so the whole thing has to be hot. I'm going to use the jacks to just squeeze in a constriction line. And then just cooling down the shape even further. Making sure everything stays on center. And I'll reheat this again. So basically, I'm just making sure this is the correct shape in which I can puff the top end without thinning the bottom end of the bubble. The bottom end is going to be the bottom end of my bowl. You can't have a thin bottom bowl or it's going to crack every time you place it down on a table. So I'm really just making sure that I'm really cooling the bottom end. We're getting there.
So is that thin piece of paper really enough to protect your hand, James?
It is, just
Yeah?
because it's soaked in water the entire time of using it, and you continuously add water to it as I work with it too. And it works the same way that the blocks work. It rides on a bed of steam, making sure to protect my hand, and the paper doesn't really burn out that much either. They definitely don't last as long as the blocks do though. Same thing, I'm just really making sure the bottom's cold. Making sure the top end of this bowl is nice and thin. So when we start to use centrifugal force and opening it, if it's too thick, it won't really have a really nice flop. But that's the shape I'm going for, just a nice even cone. I'm gonna let this cool down a little bit. Caleb's gonna gather up just a solid foot that we're gonna deliver over top. And I'm going to use my diamond shears just like I did the handle previous. Doesn't have to be big, Caleb.
Okay.
That's actually good if you want to just let it all ride off. We can use that mount. Oh, don't touch it.
Too late.
I'd say, why don't you gather on a 3/4? Just one nice gather.
Okay.
So like ditch that, yeah. And just do one nice gather and just let it hang off a little bit and bring it right over. So I'm just making sure Caleb has the right size pipe to bring it on over. Perfect amount of glass. Just like let it cool down a little bit. Or come around this side. Alrighty, straight up overhead. Add this here. I'm going to cut that off. I'm going to immediately sit down and start to shape. So I'm basically just making sure that it's going to go around the whole bottom half of the bowl. Yes, Caleb, I'd love a paddle. Really light. We're just making sure that this foot is shaped nice and even. Ready? Off for a sec. Do that one more time. And now I'm just taking a larger heat, a flash, just to make sure the top end of the bowl is still hot while we're working the bottom end of the bowl here. Caleb, can I get one more paddle? One more paddle.
Oh, one more paddle?
Yeah. Go ahead. And off. Awesome. Perfect. So there's our foot. Just gonna push in a little dome at the bottom here so I know it will sit flat. Caleb's gonna gather up a punny. And we'll do a transfer on this iron next. All right, so again, I'm just taking a flash heat, making sure the top is still hot. Because if it drops below that thermal shock point, it will crack when I add water to it. This was going to require a little bit larger of a punny, obviously, because it's a bigger piece. And you'll see as we open up this vessel, I need some leverage. What do you think, Caleb? You want to take a flash really quick?
I'll take a quick flash, yeah.
All right, you come on in. I won't hit you, I think. All right. Now Caleb's punny's nice and hot. My bottom's nice and cold. Add it to the piece. Turn nice and slow. I'll go ahead and add some water. So same thing we did with the cup. This will allow it to break nice and even off the end of the blowpipe. We got a nice transfer. And Caleb, I'm going to throw this in the clear bucket really quick. No, I'm not. Take that. All right, now we're just going to heat up the lip. Caleb, do you want to bring a lip wrap with this too?
Sure.
Since we got some time?
Yeah. Blue?
So, yeah, let's do blue. Let's do the same as the cup. It can be big, Caleb. So, I'll be honest with everyone, I actually almost put a blowpipe into a water bucket, which is a huge no-no in the hot shop, because it's so hot it will start to build pressure and the water will go up the pipe, causing it to steam, and then no one will be able to touch that pipe. It'll be super hot and very dangerous. I luckily caught my mistake immediately.
It's a good way to make a fountain, though.
I can hang out.
What'd you say? You
I can hang out, yeah. Now Caleb's just making sure the shape is like almost like the tip of a crayon, because you want the top to be a nice, perfect small connection, but then you're going to run off of that mass off the end of the blowpipe so it runs evenly. And that's how we can build up material on the end of the piece. What do you think, Caleb?
I'm good.
So same thing, ready, flip. Attach this here. I'm going to make this nice and thick, so I'm going to go around 2 times. Cast off. Now we have a nice little decorative element at the top of the piece here. Now I'm just going to take my time like I did the cup, make sure it's stuck down, make sure it's nice and even. And then we can begin to start opening up the bowl with centrifugal force, which is essentially just turning really fast. And the lip of the vessel will start to open up as we turn, as it gets hotter and hotter. Yeah. Yeah, Caleb, please. Underneath. Off for a sec. Yeah, go ahead real quick again. Just gonna make sure it's nice and even. All right. Now I'll just take my time. We're gonna open up the bowl a little bit before we start. Spinning it out. sure it's nice and hot. I'm just gonna open up this a little further. Go ahead, Caleb, really light. And off. Perfect. Can I have you on doors now? Caleb? What? Doors.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So Caleb's gonna open the left side of our reheating chamber oven. Reheating chamber. Excuse me. And then as I come out, I'll have him open up the second one. Yeah, just fly that right open. All right, Caleb, go ahead and open that. So I'm just gonna spin really quick. Come on out. Open it up nice and wide. And then let gravity just start to fold it over. It's really important to just kind of keep turning. Just don't turn super fast where you just open the whole bowl up again. Nice little cheap parlor trick we have. And that is the whole piece. Now I obviously can't fit back into the oven, so I'm gonna start to cool down the punty by adding water to the connection point. Add a little bit more. All right. And I'll knock this off on the stand here. I don't know where my paddle went.
It's over there.
That's okay. We'll knock it off with this. Nope. One more time. See if I fit into the oven here. Oh, look at that. Perfect. Sometimes it doesn't go that way. All right. I'll add just a little bit more water to the connection point. Get it really in there. Sometimes with a solid foot, it's so hot that you add the punty and you are just way too hot, it wants to fuse. Try the wood next. It pops right off. Nice punny, Caleb. All right. Now Caleb's just gonna put that away. I'll come with you this time. Open up the door for him. Very nice. Awesome. That is the floppy bowl. So, looks like we got 10 minutes left. We can probably do one more piece that isn't something that we transfer onto a punny. Do you want to make an ornament?
Sure.
Okay, Caleb's gonna make an ornament for us. I'm gonna get him set up really quick, just so he has all the things he needs to be successful. Caleb, I'm gonna assume you want an optic mold, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So we got our
Caleb really
glass
likes
here.
making Optic.
Go into some of this beautiful color that James was using. And all of our glass colors, they're made with different types of metals, different metal oxides added to the glass, give us the different colors. Now that we got that on there, we'll melt it in. Hey James, you get the door.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You sure you don't need me to keep those open for you?
I like to compare the frit melting into cheese on a pizza. You sprinkle your cheese on, and then as it heats up, it kind of melts and spreads into the surface, giving you your color.
I think I got everything for you, Caleb.
Grab our hose.
Except for that.
You get a tiny little bubble inside the glass. There we go, so a little bubble just formed. Heat it up. And go right back into our optic mold on the ground here. Give it some ribs. So much about glassblowing is about the setup. It's all the little steps that you make along the way. We got our ribs on the outside. All right. Give these ribs a little twist.
Caleb's just twisting up his optics as he adds air, kind of creating a nice sphere. He leaves a little bit of material on the bottom though, because he's going to pull a nice point to create a nice teardrop optic ornament.
And because of that surface tension that the glass has, it wants to be round. So when we're blowing glass, we're typically making a ball and then changing the shape of that ball into whatever we'd like. Just like if you were to blow bubbles in your milk. All right. So just focus the heat on the top of that ball, and we can start to deform that and bring it out to a teardrop. A little bit of extra glass on the end. See that beautiful color. So glass is very stretchy when it's hot, but as it cools down, it gets very, very, very brittle. So that's why it is important to put this away into the annealing oven before it gets too cold. Because once it reaches that point where it becomes brittle, it's really easy for the thermal contraction to crack the glass. So I'm going to go over here and kind of do that purposely right now. I come in with some cold metal, touch the glass where I want it to crack. Unfortunately, these shears have wax on them right now, so I can't really grab anything. Switch to my tools. But just touching the hot glass with the cold metal, that shocks it, that makes it really, really fragile there. And that's why we can do cool things like this and just tap the pipe, and the vibration is enough to crack the glass there.
Alrighty. Now obviously that's just sitting out in the open air. We put it into a little brick of vermiculite, and that vermiculite is going to heat up with the piece instead of draw it out. You can start to see why we don't put any wax on anything besides our jacks, because it's really hard to grab and cut anything that has wax on it.
Tweezers.
Just like it is now. Got it.
Oh, okay.
And hopefully I have enough heat, which I do. Ooh. Yeah, so that's exactly why you don't want any wax on any other tools. It was almost impossible for me to, oh, you got it, okay, cut off the end of that loop. But that is our finished ornament. It's just going to go away into our annealing oven. And like we said before, all these pieces, they're just resting at 910 degrees Fahrenheit and will be brought down later today through an annealing cycle so they can cool to room temperature for tomorrow morning. That's pretty much everything we had for you today. I'm not quite sure how live streams work, but if you have any questions, we can field them if there was any that came in. Was there any that actually came in? No? Okay. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining in. You guys have a good one.